It's time to talk about color. More specifically, we need to talk about how to set up the color palettes in automatic CSS. What do the colors mean? What should they be used for? How do you configure them? And how do you deploy them across a website? I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And what you're looking at right here is a grid of some examples of how the primary color in automatic CSS works. You have a main color, that is the primary color that you set in the ACSS dashboard. And then these 6 swatches right here represent shades of that color. These shades are automatically generated. And this is an example color, but the same principles apply to every single color in the automatic CSS color system. Below this top level grid, which has our main color and our main shades, are some examples of swatches that are using transparencies of this color. Automatic CSS also generates transparencies automatically from 10% through 90%. And then for the light shades and the dark shades and the ultra dark shades, there are transparencies for each of those shades as well. So there's a lot of color options. Below that, there are some example buttons and an example link. All of these are within the primary color family. So we have a primary button, a primary outline button, a dark primary button, and then a link which is set to primary. I'm going to go ahead and open the automatic CSS panel. Now, the first thing that you have to understand about the color system is that it's built in such a way to where you can retheme an entire website instantly. As you're going to see with this example right here, when I change the primary color in just one area, every shade, every transparency, every button, every use of that color on the website automatically updates in real time. This is one of the most powerful color systems available anywhere, in any builder, in any framework, anywhere. So I'm going to demonstrate that now. I'm going to go to color palette. I'm going to open primary and I'm going to make this change. And then we're going to talk about what all of these different settings are and what all of the different colors mean. But let's go ahead and start here. Let's start with just what happens when I change the value of a color. So I'm going to take this little color picker right here. I'm going to move this over into this territory, and you're going to see this happen as we go. But I'm going to try to find maybe an orangey or reddy color. Let's do something like in here. Okay. And then I don't even have to hit save. You can already see this being visualized. But every shade, every transparency, the buttons, the links, everything using the primary color, even the background of this section, because it was using the primary color as well, all of that has updated in real time. And now if I hit save, it's going to commit that change to the style sheet. So every page on my website is now updated with this new color. That is the power and the flexibility of the ACSS color system. Now let's go through and talk about the names of all of these colors and what they actually mean. So when you install automatic CSS, what you're likely to see is that the primary color is activated by default and the neutral color is activated by default. These are considered the 2 mandatory colors in automatic CSS, the colors that we recommend you always have on and you do not turn off. Even though there are toggle switches for them, we recommend that you keep them on. Primary color is the color that is most prominent on the website. Now, what does the word prominent actually mean? So for visualization purposes, I'm actually going to open this website, ghost.org, which I think is a decent site to use as an example. It has a few different colors going on. It's got whites, it's got, which are being used for the backgrounds, obviously. It's got this black color. It has this pink color. They're using black for buttons. If you look in the links here, these appear to be kind of like maybe a light, like a shade of black, but maybe even they have a little bit of a hue to them. If we scroll down, we see big black text here. Oh, we see a dark bluish background. We see lime green accents and a lime green link. We see another shade of some sort. We'll talk about this more in detail in just a minute. Back to the dark blue, back to the white. Of course, all of these icons are just brands in themselves, so that's not colors being deployed on the website. But here we see the lime green, again, back to the pink. And then we come down and there's some blues in the background. There's this, it seems like that pink, but maybe a shade of that pink. Another bluish shade, kind of like a steel color. And then back to black again down here. So there appears to be a lot of colors going on. And I think this is where people get confused as to, okay, one, like, what do we name all of these colors? And two, how do I set them up in automatic CSS and make sure that the correct colors are in the correct spots? And here's the thing. Every website design is different and use of colors is different from designer to designer. And what we need is some sort of standard that we can all we don't even have to all perfectly agree on it, but we can all say, okay, that works. And that's essentially what automatic CSS establishes. So on this website, if you look, the primary color, the color that they went to first, that's not like a neutral, that's not a black, it's not a white, it's not a dark blue, it's not the color, the splash of color that they went to first and foremost is this like hot pink color. And so if I was going to create ghost.org again, and I was going to set this up into automatic CSS, hot pink, this hot pink right here would be my primary color. So a lot of times a designer will just give you like a hex code for this. But if they don't, you're going to have to figure this out on your own. If you click the little swatch in Chrome-based browsers, it'll actually pull up this window right here. And you could click this arrow and you could choose what you want to see. Like, for example, if I want the hex code, I can grab the hex code. And I think you guys can see that. I think my big head is not blocking that action. Okay, so I've just grabbed that. Let me go over here and I'll just show you how easy this is. We're going to paste that in. And now I get that as my primary color. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And that's fantastic. Now, if different shades of that color are being used and I want the shades generated by automatic CSS to match exactly the shades that the designer is using, I can absolutely do that as well. What we need to talk about is what these shades are called. So just to make things nice and simple, I'm going to close automatic CSS. This is the main color right here. This shade is the lightest of the shades, and that is what we call the ultra light shade. Ultra light, that's the lightest that it can get. Next over, we have a light shade. So this is primary, just to do the names, primary ultra light. This is primary light. And then this is a little bit lighter, okay? It's primary semi-light or semi-light, okay? Then we start to go into the dark. So we have 3 shades on the lighter side. We have 3 shades on the darker side. This is semi-dark, okay? The first start of the darkness of the shades. And then this is just dark. And then this is the darkest of the shades. That is ultra dark. Now down here, we have just some transparencies of this main color. Okay, so we know what all the names are. Let's go back to Ghost for a second. I want to go back down here to where we had these cards. And where are they? Here they are. This is clearly a lighter version of that hot pink color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to inspect this. And what you would want to do is look at the overall design and say, is that the lightest implementation of that color? I wouldn't say so. I would say that's just light. Okay, it's just light. Now, whether that goes in semi-light or ultra light, again, we need more examples of this design. We need to see how these shades have been used. And if you find that, oh, well, that's actually the only shade that's been used, so you put it in as light, that gives you semi-light and ultra light as additional options in the future around it. And then you just ignore the others. You just use the light shade. So it's fairly simple, but I'm going to show you how we can adjust this now, because we're not going to get the hex codes anymore for this. What we're going to get are what are called HSL values: hue, saturation, and lightness. A shade is just the same hue of that color, but with essentially different saturation and lightness values. And it doesn't really matter what kind of color mix you're using, we add whites in or we add black in, it's still going to generate things that match up with a hue, a saturation, and a lightness. And so once again, what I'm going to do, I'm going to find the use of this background. Let's go into computed here. And here's the background color right here. So I'm going to head over, I'm going to click the swatch, and I am going to select HSL. Okay, you see that the hue is 336 degrees, the saturation 100%, and the lightness 90%. Now, I did a whole video on how HSL works and how our color system works, like kind of technically speaking. I'll go ahead and link to that in the description. We're not going to rehash all of that right now, but we need to know 336, 190. 336, 190. I'm going to open primary. I'm going to go to the light shade. Look at the hue. 336 is already there. Why? Because I told you shades typically are the exact same hue. They're just different saturation and lightness values. And in fact, the light shade from Automatic CSS that was automatically generated almost exactly matches the light shade being used on that real website. 100% saturation is already set. 85 is the difference, okay? The one generated by Automatic CSS is a little bit darker, slightly darker than the one that Ghost is using. But that's no problem because I can simply tell Automatic CSS, no, we want that shade to be 90 on the lightness, not 85. And then I can save, and I have now dialed that shade in. It's an exact match for what Ghost is using. Now, sometimes you will, depending on what the designer has done, you and how they've generated the shades in Figma or XD or wherever the design is coming from, you might find that the hue is a point or two different, or the saturation is a point or two different. It shouldn't be wildly different, but if it's just a few points difference, well, you can change the saturation and you can change the hue values as well. And so you can get exact matches for every shade that you need to get. And you do that by clicking on the shade in Automatic CSS, altering the hue, the saturation, and the lightness values. You can do that for every single shade. There's also a hover shade, by the way. That's another shade available in Automatic CSS, which is like a contextual shade. It's kind of reserved only for the use of hover. So if you were going to use primary, the hover version is primary hover. So if you're, you could set that to whatever you want. If you want to hover darker or hover lighter, hover with less saturation, hover with more saturation, that is completely up to you. But there is a dedicated shade called hover for the context of hoverable elements using that color. Okay. All right. Let's go down to these toggle switches. You're going to see something for alternate color. We're not going to talk about that right now because we're going to do a whole video dedicated to color scheme. Okay, the next is you're going to see switches for main transparencies. So that is the 10 through 90% of the main color. Then you're going to see light transparency. So that light shade that I just created, 10% through 90% opacity of that are automatically available in the ACSS system. Dark transparency, so this swatch right here, 10% through 90% available of dark, okay? And that's primary dark trans 10 or primary dark trans 20 or primary dark trans 30. Once you understand the syntax, there's really nothing to memorize, right? You just know, hey, I got 10 through 90% available to me of light, of dark, of the main thing, and of ultra dark as well. And that's what this toggle is right there, ultra dark. So every color, I'm going to turn on secondary now. Every color is going to behave exactly the same way. All of the same shades, all of the same options. This is how, once you understand the system and the syntax, it's all in your brain. You don't have to reference things. You don't need a cheat sheet. You don't need to constantly look things up. Things don't change from site to site to site to site. It's always the same. It's always consistent, and it's always right at your fingertips. Everything is already available to you and already set up. All you have to do is dial things in according to the design on the project that you happen to be working on. Okay, so now let's talk about how do we use these colors? We talked about primary is like the go-to splash of color being used on the website. For example, Coca-Cola. What is the primary color that comes to your brain when you think about Coca-Cola? Red. right? Coca-Cola has red as their do they use blacks? Do they use whites? Do they maybe spring? Yes, yeah, for sure they do, right? But their primary color is red. All right, so that is essentially what the primary color is. What about the secondary color? Well, we've defined the secondary color as simply the second most used brand color, or the second most prominent brand color. That is going to be in the secondary slot. Then we have a tertiary slot. I want to talk about tertiary versus accent, okay? So the tertiary slot is simply another brand color option if it's needed, whereas the accent color slot, okay, don't take these in literal order that they are listed, right? The accent color slot is the least most used brand color. So it is a brand color, right? But is the least most used brand color, or the brand color that's used in obvious accent areas, okay? Or the context of what would be considered accent. And we would recommend that you use accent over tertiary simply because its name makes literal sense. It's like if we're going to use that color for accents, then we should call it accent. So then tertiary is there if there is another brand color beyond accent that you need to program in. And at this point, we're actually getting into a territory where most great designs are not going to have these many colors. Most designs rely on 1, 2, 3 colors, and then, of course, neutrals, whites, blacks, things like grays, things like that. But to have that many prominent brand colors, you're going to start to get into an area where the design is a little bit chaotic. It is inconsistent. It's not great. Now, there are use cases, potentially, I'll call them edge cases, where people feel like they need more colors, and that's okay. Automatic CSS absolutely supports that. But we don't need to go into the realm of edge cases and complexities in this video. We need to keep things simple and talk about what you're going to do and how you're going to approach 98.5% of the projects that you work on. And then we'll deal with edge cases in a future video. So we've talked about secondary, second most prominent brand color. Accent would be the least most used brand color. Tertiary, if you really need another brand color beyond primary, secondary, and accent. And by the way, base. Let's talk about base. So base is the primary brand's neutral color, okay? So if they, for example, it's great to use examples. Let's hop back to Ghost. This dark blue right here that they're using, all I see are white, okay, and black. And by the way, white and black are already in the automatic CSS system. You do not have to set those or configure them or add them. They're just automatically there by default. So anytime you see white or black, just know I've got that taken care of. I don't need to worry about that, right? Okay, so we have a hue-based neutral color, which is this dark blue. And by the way, this color right here, and now after you practice for a while, you're going to just know this when you first see it, right? But I know that this shade right here is a shade of this color, okay? This lighter color is a shade of this dark blue right here. If I go down to this card down here, right here, that's yet another shade of that same dark blue color. So I know that I don't need a color for this dark blue and a color for this like slate gray and a color for this light gray. No. I need to set this dark blue as a color, and then the shade system is going to take care of this background and this background. Okay, those aren't separate colors. They're shades of a color, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to this dark blue, and we're going to figure out what this is, and we're going to go set this in the base color slot, okay? Here's the dark blue right here, and I'm going to ask for the hex code for that. And I'm going to go over to Automatic CSS, and under base, I'm going to turn on base, paste in this hex code. And now when I hit save, it's going to regenerate the style sheet. And that is going to be my new brand neutral color that I can use for things like text and backgrounds. That's what you see it being used for on ghost.org. Okay, so we now know what base is for. Base is the neutral brand color, and there's probably only going to be one of those, okay? But then, remember, Ghost is also using black and white. Well, guess what? That's what the neutral palette is for. I would highly recommend you keep neutrals neutrals. Yes, it allows you to come in here and adjust the hue and things like that. You could choose any color for this that you wanted to. But then you lose your shades, like your grays, right? You'll never lose black and white. Black and white exist outside of all of these colors, okay? We always have those as black is always black, white is always white, because when you reference black and you reference white, it wouldn't make sense for any other color but those to appear, right? So black and white exist outside of all of this. But the shades of gray that exist within this neutral palette, if you alter the value of neutral, those shades, you will lose your true pure grays, which is why I don't really recommend configuring this neutral palette. I recommend leaving it exactly as is, because the times where you legitimately need a neutral gray, that is where that is going to come from. Now, the only color on this ghost.org website that we haven't talked about yet is this lime green color. As you can see, it's being used as a button. It's also being used for accent text. And one general rule in the past that we've talked about is if a website uses a specific color for buttons and links, it's a good indication that that's probably that website's primary color. But this is just a general rule of thumb. And it's one of the reasons I chose ghost.org as an example, because as you'll see, if I scroll to the top, they actually use many different colors for buttons and links. They kind of break the norms and best practices in this case, because they have a black button up here. If we scroll down, we can see the color we decided that was already the primary color is being used as the link color here. But then they use the green color for a link here. I come down and I see, look at this. The primary is actually being used in an accent area. Let me keep scrolling. Again, used in the accent area. Oh, but once again, used as a link color. And then we're back to the lime green kind of being in accent areas. And then primary is being used for links. And then we have a black button. We have a green button. We have a primary colored button. We have a white button. There's kind of a lot of stuff going on here. And then finally down in the footer, we have the lime green with a button and the accent text. So how do we handle this? How do we handle this kind of scenario? Well, it was already very clear to us that the hot pink is kind of the primary go-to splash of color. So we made that our primary color. And I would argue, obviously, because this dark blue is the base, it's not like a secondary color or anything like that. It is the base color, that the only thing left is to go with lime green as the accent color. So again, I am going to right click and I will inspect this. We will go into computed and I'm going to go find color right here. I'm going to open this. I'm going to ask for the hex code for this. And then I'm going to go back to automatic CSS and I'm going to go down to accent, turn on accent, and I will paste in. And now we have the accent color programmed in and ready to go. But does that make sense of why I chose the accent slot for that particular color? If we go back to Ghost, what you're going to see, the way I made this determination is most uses of this lime green are in obvious accent areas, accent headings. If we go down and find that little chart section again, wherever that went, that's like how an accent color would typically be used, like in a chart like this. And it's not used a lot. Okay, so it kind of fits the definition of an accent. It's like the least used brand color. And so could it go in secondary? Maybe somebody could argue for that. Could it go in tertiary? Maybe somebody could argue for that. Could it go in accent? That's the argument that I'm making. At the end of the day, there is no, you must do it like this. Okay, primary is pretty clearly defined. Base is pretty clearly defined. We know exactly what neutral is. Accent has a specific name that fits a specific context, and that's why I'm using green in the accent slot. But secondary, if you put it there, would you be wrong? Would that be bad? No. If you put it in the tertiary slot, would that be wrong? Would that be bad? Would it be some sort of violation? No. Okay, so there's some wiggle room, there's some gray area, there's some nuance for you to decide what makes sense for you on your projects, and then try to be as consistent as possible with the application of colors into those specific names. Okay, that concludes the discussion about the main colors in the automatic CSS color system. Now let's talk about semantic colors. Semantic colors are colors that we define for specific situations that happen on websites and in applications, and that are kind of defined industry-wide. For example, a confirmation message that might have a background and text colors and all of that to go along with it. And traditionally we use green because green means go, green means good, green means success. It went through it, it processed, whatever. So that's already set up for you in automatic CSS. It's just there. It's called success. But if you don't like the green that we chose, you can choose whatever shade of green you want. We would recommend that you keep it green. You don't have to, but we'd recommend that because that's kind of the industry standard for success, right? Okay, then we have warning. You turn that on, it's going to be a yellow. Yellow means like caution, right? Everybody kind of understands that. Yellow is like, caution, slow down, whatever. So warning is automatically yellow for you in the automatic CSS system. Can you tweak it? Can you adjust it? Absolutely. Are all the shades available for it? Absolutely. Are all the transparencies available for it? Absolutely, okay? Follows all the same syntaxes. If I want the transparent, or I want 20% transparent version of warning, what would that be? Warning trans 20, right? If I want the light version of the warning color at 20%, what would that be? Warning light trans 20, okay? Same naming syntax, same convention, same options, same everything. Okay, then we have info, blue, okay? You've seen an info context box. They're typically blue, right? Fully customizable. And then danger, what color would that be? Red, stop. Rethink the situation, okay? Or error, right? Okay, so danger already red, you can configure it to your heart's content. Now, these are off by default because not everybody wants them or needs them on every project, but should you want them or need them, they are one click away. Next, you're going to see current design, you're going to see auto color scheme, you're going to see scheme protection. That is all going to be reserved for the video that we do on color scheme. If you have any questions, obviously post them down below in the comments. We will jump in and help you out, or post a thread in the support community. And I will say this, we are going to be doing many practical application videos where we take a design and say, here's how to set up the colors for this design. It really does help when you look at actual real world examples, and not just one example, but a simple example, a complex example, an edge case example. We can't bake all of that into one single video, but we can and are very much willing to do a series of videos to use as examples to help you navigate these scenarios. But again, if you ever have any question as to what should this color be, or what should this shade be, or how can I accomplish this scenario, that is exactly what the support community is for. We are more than happy to help you there. All right, this has been palette setup in automatic CSS, and I'll be back with another lesson very, very soon.